Syrian opposition fighters are now trying to take control of supply routes into Aleppo. They're attempting to block the military from using the main highway to the city. Egypt's president says his decision to force the retirement of the country's two top generals is for the benefit of the nation. An inquiry into last year's attacks in Norway has found police could have prevented many of the deaths. It says authorities could have stopped the massacre on Atoya Island much sooner. Let's go back to Syria now, and more claims and counterclaims. Opposition fighters say they have captured the pilot of a fighter jet near the eastern border with Iraq. They've released this footage, which appears to show a plane being shot down. Al-Jazeera has no way of verifying these images. Syrian state TV reports say an aircraft crashed in the area due to technical problems. We're joined now by Ammar Waqqaf from the Syrian Social Club, a London-based group supporting President Bashar al-Assad. Thank you very much for joining us. How do you think what's happened today is being viewed in the Assad camp? The claims that the fighting is getting ever more effective in Aleppo by the rebel fighters, the potential capture of a fighter pilot?
Well, first of all, the Syrian Social Club advocates regime reform, not regime change. Second of all, the apparent loss of the Syrian aircraft was actually in the Deir ez-Zor area, not in the Aleppo area.
So, what is the difference between regime reform? I mean, is that assuming that Assad still stays in power?
Well, when the crisis started, the Syrian Social Club said that if we are going to go about trying to change the regime with all the support of the regional powers, each trying to have their way, it's going to cost us a lot. So let's try and push for some sort of a regime reform. I think asking whether President Assad stays or goes is definitely... I think asking for President Assad to go or stay is definitely the wrong question. The right question is what Syria we want after this crisis. And it is the problem of pursuing the downfall of the regime that has put us into all these complications, unfortunately.
Okay, so what do you make of where we are today and how this is being viewed, and Assad and his men's control of what's happening in the country and their grip on power? Do you think their days are numbered?
Well, the Syrian government has, throughout this crisis, been fairly stable in a sense. The army is pretty much, intact. They're carrying out operations against the insurgency. We've seen today a loss of an airplane, whether for technical reasons or whether was it really shot down, we don't know. But we've seen also the video of the pilot. And we've seen the claim by the armed groups that they are going to go with the Geneva Conventions. Not sure which chapters they mean, but if you go to my Twitter account... What do you mean by the government and the army is quite stable? We've seen massive defections, high-level defections. That doesn't suggest stability? No, you haven't seen. You've seen some defections that have been orchestrated most probably by some sort of covert operations, intelligence operations. But pretty much the Syrian government is still functioning, the army is still intact. And if you want to go by the theory that the Syrian army, like half of it has defected, you can do so. But the fact of the matter is the Syrian army is very much still intact. Its strategic power is still there. Some individuals have really switched sides, we know that, but most of them are in Turkey. The people who are fighting on the ground have little to do with any army training, as we have seen time and time again in clashes with the Syrian army.
If they've got very little to do with army training, how come the army is taking this type of force? I mean, we've got estimates of up to 20,000 people have been killed in this fighting.
Yes, well, if you go again to my Twitter account at Ammar, you'll see two recent videos of a chopping of a head of a detainee and throwing government employees off a post office building. People are being killed by those insurgents for not really standing with them. And that, in a sense, is giving the army a lot of information, because a lot of people are trying to, get even with those insurgents by providing vital information to the army. And we've seen in Aleppo and Damascus that the army operations have been more swift than in Homs, for example, precisely for this. People are losing very much faith with what is called the Free Syrian Army.
But, okay, as awful as those atrocities are that you've spoken about, I mean, the army seems to be having a sort of disproportionate amount of force that they are unleashing on the rebels and innocent people.
Well, we're watching carefully the army units that are being used. What we understand is that the main force of the army is still unused now. We did see tanks, we did see some artillery, and we did see some fighter jets and helicopters using. But I think, in a sense, they are not being used to, carpet bomb a place, but there are certain information, again, provided by civilians who are captured and detained by or in a sense hijacked, whose neighborhoods have been hijacked by the Free Syrian Army fighting groups, and they are providing precise information, and the army is flexing its muscles a little bit, but there is certainly no full-fledged use of force. Now, the problem we're having
so would you say, sorry, very
that
briefly, because unfortunately I have to wrap this up, would you say that the Assad government is still fully in control and he's not going anywhere soon?
I don't think they're going anywhere soon. We have to understand why this government has remained in its place for the past 18 months. It is because that there is a large proportion of the Syrian people do not want this revolution, let alone those who actually believe in President Assad himself. I think, and I can assure you that the proportion of these people who do not want this central government to collapse is growing every day, even though there is a PR campaign they're talking about for the Free Syrian Army, they're talking about the Geneva Convention, they're trying to, regain the hearts and minds of the Syrian people, but I think that's too late.
Okay, certainly good to hear your views, Ammar Waqqaf. Thank you very much for talking to us. Well, corruption is hampering the battle against drug-related violence in Mexico. Gangs have infiltrated many of the agencies fighting crime. As part of